economia partidei. Delgado acolo este, va fi corner, dragi ascultători.
Hello and welcome back to It Ain't Broke. It's the internet review show where some men sit around and say fuck all the time. My name is Richard Jackson and I am joined by the Secretary of the High Council of Valverde and doll collector, Duncan Casey.
Fuck.
Told you.
Yeah.
What did I tell you? What did I tell
All
you?
the time. Hello.
Excellent. Well, in the continuing season of self-flagellation, we're here to review Terminator Salvation, starring Christian Bale and directed by Mugga. Here's a clip.
You and me, we've been at war since before either of us even existed. You tried killing my mother, Sarah Connor. You killed my father, Kyle Reese. You will not kill me. Kyle Reese is on a transporter heading for Skynet. If I wanted to kill him, I would have done him in LA.
Terminator self-flagellation.
Flagellator. So Duncan, I think it's on you. Why don't you tell us all about Terminator Salvation?
The year was 2009, and a Terminator. Well, here's the thing. So this Terminator sequel was coming up. I remember seeing all the material for it, and it was, compared to all the other ones, it was going to be set in the war, and it looked to be very different. And in a way, it was. But what we got was this main plot that's set after Judgment Day, after the war, involving John Connor and his scrabble to get kind of the leadership that we all know that he's supposed to have. We follow this story though by way of a character that seems rather out of place in the whole scenario, which is Marcus Wright, who is a death row prisoner who is put to death and then wakes up later on and has been turned into, spoilers, although it was in the trailer, a Terminator.
And played by Sentient Elbow, Sam Worthington.
In another move with Australia sending us its best and brightest to a Terminator movie. Yes, he was. I'm actually, Sam Worthington is someone who I have come to appreciate. If you've watched the Unabomber thing on Netflix that he's in, he's actually very good. So
I think that
I think in the right thing, when cast right, he's very good.
Mate, you know, I like to get the boot into Jai Courtney, and Suicide Squad was shit, but he was great in it. When he was allowed to cut loose and have fun, hey.
When the casting's right, it's right. But in this one, it's Marcus Wrong.
Marcus Wrong! See what he did?
Yeah.
All about the puns, you can have that one, that's
Yeah.
yours to keep. Yeah, so Terminator Salvation, I think it's the best intentioned of these. And by these, I mean Terminators 3, 4, and 5, if you recall that.
Right, yeah.
I do think one of my many problems with it is that it's so earnest. I think it's a complete about turn from Terminator 3, which is like borderline parody.
Oh, it is parody. It just is.
Well, yeah, and it's horribly disrespectful. Well, this is way too reverent to the point that it's kind of mawkish, and that's quite funny. So they have to throw in Guns N' Roses and stuff like that, and have the motorbike shot and stuff. And it's sort of super serious, but at the same time has like motorbike action figures and Transformers, and the bit where the man jumps into an irradiated sea at night and then swims presumably to the screen door of a submarine where they let him in.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
It just puts his hand over his face as he jumps. I think a scene that typifies that speaks to exactly what you're saying is where, isn't it? It's towards the end when he's like fighting the T-800 or whatever, and he goes, "Come on, you son of a bitch!" or whatever, and he just yells at it, and it's like, what? I'm not sure what we're saying here.
Of course, the home of the famous Christian Bale meltdown thing, which frankly, I know Christian Bale's had a rep of being kind of like a bit of an angry dude. I'm not totally off book with him on that rant because, you know, he's got a craft as well as the lighting guy, and I understand he was like walking about during a take
Here's the thing with that. Yeah, these things happen all the time. I mean, look, I preface this by saying, like, I work on a lot of productions. I've seen people get annoyed with crew. I've seen people who are, shall we say, of a higher status in terms of actors, or further up the IMDb star meter than I am, getting annoyed with crew, but for good reason. Like, you know, like if there was something I worked on where it required a very emotional scene, and the lead actor who I was working with was by take 3 like struggling to bring all this up again, which is perfectly normal. And they were having to retake because a light had gone out in the middle of a take, or something wasn't right in the thing. And at that point, it's perfectly okay to get annoyed with other people for not doing their job diligently, because it means you've then got to expend all this energy, and you're going to get to the point where your performance isn't going to ring true anymore. And so I understand if you're in that scenario, it's not. And Christian Bale was right the way he handled it afterwards, because he came out publicly. He said on the radio, I think in LA or whatever, he was like, "Look, hands up, I acted like a punk." After, you know, he was saying
that's whichever accent he chooses to speak with at any given time, by the way.
The fucking rant thing is so funny, because he starts swearing in English. It's like
You fucking guy.
yeah, it's like, I want you off the. He goes like, I want you off the set, you prick. It's like, it's that sort of. It's what they used to do on Bo Selector. Do you remember on Bo Selector when they did the Osbournes? Kelly Osbourne would speak with an American accent until she started swearing.
She's a douchebag.
Douchebag. Oh, fucking Tony, he's a fucking. So like it was like a literal thing when that happened. But so look, I mean, like, what's interesting, and I think oddly enough, Michael Caine brought this up in it on Jimmy Kimmel or something at the time. And I won't do the voice, but he said that basically, because Jimmy Kimmel said, obviously you know Christian Bale, this is right when all this happened. He goes, yeah, I know Christian. And he said, but he goes, what's interesting is the fact that that rant tape came out, a month or so before the film was due to drop. Now, bearing in mind, this is on-set recorded, audio. Why did they wait, like the best part of a year, to just drop it right before the film came out? It's like, was that a move to... Was it a studio move? Was it, the timing of it's very interesting. But anyway,
I'm not saying Christian Bale isn't an arse. I never met him, but I tend to come down on his side in that whole thing.
I mean, look, was he a bit overhanded with how he approached it? Yes. Should he have done that in front of the crew and everyone? No. But I totally get where he was coming from. It was just like he's trying to do a scene and someone's fucking around in his eye line. It's very distracting.
It's distracting!
Give me a fucking answer! What? He's like, what don't you get about it? Yeah.
Time to digress. I feel that was fun.
But there we go.
But there we go. Well, so the thing is with this, it picks up threads from Terminator 3 pretty much exactly. It brings back Kate Brewster. It has John Connor. We touched on this in Terminator 3 review. Like, I feel like the aesthetic's kind of wrong, because it's got this kind of sandblasted Mad Maxy type thing, where really it should be kind of all at night and stuff. And the fact that Resistance are getting around in fighter jets and stuff and submarines, it's like, aren't they supposed to be like a guerrilla army?
Yeah, well, what's odd about that is like the thing I got from the first 2 films of the TechCom army is that they were guerrilla-ish, in that they were just commandeering trucks and stuff that they put roll cages in and guns on the back of. But they had like a uniform. Like they had quite a distinctive uniform.
They were like a cohesive unit, but they had to work underground essentially, and they mostly come up at night. That's in dialogue, and the whole of this is in day, more or less.
I know, but it's interesting how that is an element that they could have quite easily replicated in Salvation, that I think would have keyed it in. Like, imagine the same film, but they just had that TechCom uniform rather than just sort of being this rebel band.
Well, the future war you want, and I hate to pick nits, the future war you want is the one from Terminator 2, not some kind of like, well, actually, this is 10 years before. Nah, because everybody's got kind of lead-based, everyone's got regular guns, and it's all kind of grounded in our reality. And it's like, it is about time-traveling robots, fundamentally. You don't need to... It's sort of like the argument for realism in Star Wars. It's like, it's about fucking space wizards, mate. I saw a video, it's like, the spaceships in Star Wars wouldn't work. And it's like, neither would the lightsabers, you fucking idiots. It's Star Wars. You don't need to dial that back. And this one tries to be sort of, gritty. And you've got Jonathan Nolan co-wrote it. It's got fucking Christian Bale in it. So they clearly had an eye on Batman. And it's odd. I find it so strange because it's got this kind of fixation on sort of being realistic, But then the script is so full of like dumb inconsistencies because it's like I think the bonding moment between Sam Worthington's character and Moon Bloodgood's character is when her parachute has caught on like a pylon and he climbs up to go help her and she's like, I don't need your help, I can do it myself. And her plan is to just cut the rope and fall to her death. Yeah. So when he catches her, she's like, oh, we should be friends. And it's like, what
it's
was
weird
your
because
plan?
he sort of catches her, but he does drop it, doesn't he? So it's obviously that height is meant to not be a fatal...
Right, okay.
But it does look like at least a sort of ankle breaking...
Whatever way you cut it, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it doesn't. It looks bad.
Because like he catches her, so it's like, well, why was she doing it? She was just cutting herself down.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. And then there's we touched this Terminator 3, so I won't go into it, but like the Skynet has like tables and chairs and a water cooler and somebody's baked some cupcakes. Like it's all like that. And Helena Bonham Carter is in it just because. Danny Elfman does the music, so you've got that kind of Tim Burton link for some reason.
It's a bit ambiguous as well as at the end whether or not all of that is Skynet or if that is just a factory for Terminators plus a human keeping pen. You know, because it's not very clear what that is. Because again, it's that thing of like, we destroyed Skynet. Did you? Or did what? Like I'm not sure what all that was.
And I think this is set in, I believe it's set in 2019. So it's like the far off year. It might even be 2017. I think it's 2019. But then Terminator Genesis is set in like partially in like 2018 or something, isn't it? When they do their jump forward.
Yeah.
So we're all sort of sure they've accelerated. You could have we had this great grace period until 2027, and we've sort of spaffed that by doing this.
For some reason, in the late 80s, early 90s. 1997 was the year that shit was supposed to go down.
Shit went down, yeah.
Because like Demolition Man, Terminator 2, what was the other thing said about that? Oh, well, Predator 2 was set in 97.
Predator set in 97,
so
yeah.
it's, I don't know why that year was...
Strange Days is, of course, 1999, so it's in that similar type area.
But, yeah, no, I mean, it is, like you say, it's a weird... Here's the thing. If I were tasked with, you have to make a Terminator sequel, but it's got to be set in the war, I would struggle because I think the thing of it is, it's like the way the war was told in those films was a thing that was like it was like a flashback or flash forward, depending on how you look at it, to a thing that we're supposed to be afraid of because we want to avoid it. Right? This is the stakes that they're showing, right?
Yeah, that's what we're trying to prevent.
This is what we're trying to prevent. So, or at least sustain our overcoming of it, because we're not in the first one. We're not trying to. I watched the first one the other day randomly and I love it.
Because it's amazing.
Because it is amazing. But in that film, you know, that the whole point of showing the future war was like, this is what we get to, but this is what we can overcome. It's showing the stakes, like you say. To then make a film about that, it was essentially a plot device. It wasn't a whole back narrative that we needed to look at. It was a plot device. It was there to sort of say, look, these are the stakes of what tonight.
It's about the meeting of, I think the only interesting wrinkle in it is because it doesn't have any time travel in it. Yet it's completely dependent on time travel because it's about having to save your own dad who's younger than you. It's the only, I'm not saying it's done well, it's the only interesting part.
You essentially get a bit of time travel in the, like, we start with Sam Worthington present day and he jumps forward to the, like,
well, yeah, but no time travel happens though, does it? I mean,
no.
It's just they upload his brain into a fucking...
But we as an audience sort of time travel, kind of, like, it's a, you know, I mean, there is...
It's a time leap, sure.
Yeah. That, again, it's a... Looking back at it now, I mean, gosh, we're nearly 10 years away from when it came out. You know, I remember all too well the advertising, the fact that it was the beginning of the first of those two cock-ups in advertising Terminator movies, where they reveal a massive spoiler in the trailer, which was that
it seems to have become the hallmark of that series across two films.
Yeah, it's like Sam Worthington's character is a Terminator he doesn't know, and that whole plot, you know, so. Let's go back a bit. The way this was penned, or the way that this was written, was originally going to be that, like, the Marcus Wright character was the mainstay of the film, that John Connor was pretty much relegated to the kind of cameo that he had in Terminator 2 as an adult. And once Christian Bale came on, I think Christian Bale was it that Christian Bale was supposed to play Marcus Wright? Yes.
Yeah, he wanted to be Marcus Wright. No, they wanted him to be he wanted to be John Connor.
He wanted to be John Connor because he's Christian Bale. They were like, okay, that meant John Connor had to suddenly be written up like as a bigger character. And you know, with that in mind, I actually think they didn't do a bad job of writing up John Connor. But what I think probably happened was all the Marcus Wright stuff went to John Connor, and all Marcus Wright was in the end was this sort of weird plot device that we're supposed to care about. He seems overwritten as a result
For what he is.
Oh. And the relationship he has with John Connor is really fakey and not really... It dumbs John Connor down as well, because he starts saying like, you tried to kill my mother. And it's like, again, with that, like...
Well,
it's just...
to continue from Terminator 3, the running thread is that John Connor's a dipshit.
Exactly, then. It's like he doesn't get what Terminators are, clearly, because...
There's been a thread, it's same with AVPR, there's something about your title character just being a bit of a cretin that seemed to happen about 10 years ago, just not being very good at their job.
Yeah.
You know? And that's quite a nice...
It's bizarre, but that... we don't really. There's no kind of meta. This is my. I think as a piece of sort of entertainment, it's fine. And actually, there's some great visual stuff in it. But there's no subtextual stuff. Whereas the first two had great themes about parenthood and what it means to be human, which is what these sorts of things should all be about anyway. This, you know, you would think if you're going to have a character who thinks he's human but is a robot underneath. You would think you would then want to say lots of stuff to do with what it means to be human, and you sort of see him having angsty little tantrums about finding out he's a Terminator and all that. But and Skynet sort of goes and puts him back together, like, you know, because anyway. But it's and then there's this sort of really last 11th hour plot twist that he was sent to kill John Connor, and he succeeded because he brought John Connor to, and the whole point was for him to bring John Connor to Skynet or whatever it is for a T-800 to then kill him. It's like,
yeah,
what? Why was that a good idea? Like, why was it a good idea to create this thing that doesn't know it's a Terminator that's going to somehow find John Connor? How do you know it's going to find John Connor?
Terminators love throwing people across rooms instead of breaking their necks. And
Yeah.
it's one thing you kind of learn from the Terminator in the first two films, that they're really direct and they have a job to do.
Yeah.
But like the Terminators from sort of Terminator 3 onwards have that kind of WWE sensibility where they sort of like slap you around the head and stomp on the floor.
Yeah,
you know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
The first thing it does to John Connor is throw him across the room. And it's like,
Yeah.
that's your ultimate goal, is to kill this motherfucker. And all you've done is thrown him.
The only example I'll say from the first film is Matt, when he throws him around the room, but not before trying to punch his face out through the, you know,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
like he is trying the direct approach, but then he's being attacked, so he's just throwing him around the room. But there's no, I get it in Terminator 2, like if a Terminator's fighting a Terminator, then maybe the best
I
strategy
think
is
with
to throw
Matt
it.
as well, he doesn't necessarily have to kill Matt. I think he analyses that threat and is like, I'm fucking killing him.
Yeah.
Plus, also, like, the depiction of Terminators has changed a lot in that the Terminator gets knocked on its arse by a shotgun and appears unconscious in the first film, and it's all sort of like, but that's
for the audience.
That's for the audience. That was a standalone film that was built around
Yeah.
that ambiguity.
Yeah, I mean, like there was that, but yeah, that was a plot device for the audience. Again, very much like the second film starts off, it's like about hoodwinking the audience, and that sort of falls apart upon second viewing, because you're like, yeah, why does the Terminator just fall over and appear unconscious? Is it like so people briefly think he's dead? Like,
Yeah, part of the
I mean, you
ruse.
can buy into it that like, look, it's a machine, it's unstable. If it gets knocked over,
Plus,
it
what
has
it
to, like-
actually meant then, in the context of that film, it meant something different. It's
Yeah.
only from the second film where the Terminator essentially becomes a indestructible superhero guy.
There's that thing in Salvation as well, though, where he's like, Marcus Wright's in the river, and he's like, I haven't shot you in the heart, and I see that thing beating a mile a minute or whatever. And it's like, if his heart is keeping him alive, why would the Terminators allow him to be that vulnerable? I mean, he's essentially as vulnerable as a human
Why does
being.
he need a human heart?
Yeah, and secondly, like, he's in a muddy river. Like, is that not going to cause him all kinds of infection?
Now, right, so he's in a muddy river after a nuclear war as well. Let's not forget that.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. Terminator Salvation, I think, is fundamentally well-intentioned. I think McGee, he's not a filmmaker that I value in any kind of way, but having seen him talk about this and having watched the text itself, he had the best of intentions, and I don't think he was cynical. I think that was his vision for a Terminator film, and I've got no truck with that. He might be a bit of a hack, but he was making the film he wanted to make, I think. The aesthetics of it are not really, they don't really jive with what I would call Terminator, but they work and they're consistent. There's nice photography.
Yeah.
There's lots of kind of vistas of the desert and things like that. In terms of design work, Stan Winston's crew are back, and I've said this before, the T-600 is kind of dumb because it couldn't infiltrate anything, but, you know, call it a T-400 and it works. It fits the general kind of Terminator aesthetic. I think the motorbikes are dumb. I think the giant transformer is dumb. Here's the thing, though. This is full of so many dumb kind of left turns that feel like they were written by a child. So like there's the diving into the submarine thing is a big one. There's kind of Skynet and its tables and chairs is a big one. But the biggest, dumbest fucking thing in the whole film is that John Connor gets stabbed through the heart and they perform a heart transplant in a nuclear desert in a tent with the heart of some dude who I guess Marcus Wright had a compatible heart. And the only reason the Marcus Wright character has a heart, like the fucking, and I guess it's some, like, if you want to put some subtext, I guess it's a Tin Man reference. It's so they can pop it into John Connor at the end, which presumably fucking Bryce Dallas Howard just pops it out, gives it a rinse, and then just super glues it into John. They get a fucking heart transplant, for fuck's sake, in a tent in the radioactive desert. And that heart's had a pop in a fucking sludge basin.
Also, Catherine Brewster. She's like a vet, isn't she?
I just spilled beer all over my face.
Oh, nice.
I'm going to cut tonight. It went up my nose and everything. Yeah. I don't cut things out. That's not how we do things these days.
Not at the Valverde.
Not at Valverde. She was a vet, yeah.
She was a vet, so how would she be in any way qualified to transplant?
That's the having gone in as a veterinarian into the underground bunker, she's then learned to do a heart transplant.
It also, I mean, actually, we brought this up when talking about, I think, Terminator 3 before, but there's real lack of a sense of urgency in this. You know, it's like they all seem to hang around in military bases, and it's like they'll go out to war, but they'll come back and they.
It feels like a war that has front lines.
Yes.
You know, it feels like it's like kind of like they've got an air base.
Yeah.
And they've got these installations. It's like no, surely the humans are sort of constantly. What Carl Reese painted was an image of humans constantly on the hop and underground.
Well, I suppose though, I mean, you know, in fairness to it, it's early days in the war.
Yeah.
You know, Skynet.
It's like a good 10 years before the war that we've seen.
Yeah.
You know.
So perhaps it's but they're not at the brink yet, you know, which is where they are.
Fucking embrace it though, I say. Like, because it's this weird thing of like, oh, we have to make it kind of grounded and realistic. So it's got like modern day weapons and stuff like that. And the Terminators don't have kind of plasma rifles and stuff yet. And it's like, dude, embrace it. It's a fucking Terminator film. Yeah. Again, it's like the realism thing in Star Wars. It's like, it's Star Wars, mate. It's about space wizards. I don't give a shit like whether or not the ships would work or how someone's backpack functions. It doesn't matter. Like, suspend your disbelief for a bit. And you're already in a series that's hinged entirely on time travel, so fuck it, like just go nuts.
I mean, it's that thing of like, I just think, well, I mean, like we said, you just shouldn't be making these really, but I mean, you know, if you're gonna do this, what are you going to make that's in any way of interest to anyone? We know what happens in the future war. We know what's at stake.
What's the subtext here? What's the metaphor? I mean, you touched on this already. Like Terminator 2 has kind of surrogacy and stuff like that, and you know, fatherhood and paternal stuff, and absent families and things like that, and you know, kind of nuclear proliferation and technology out of control, and you know,
and role reversal.
Yeah, role reversal stuff. Like so salvation. Okay, role reversal in that you kind of have to father your dad a bit. You know, you have to.
Yeah.
But that's just new. Circumstance, and it's not new.
Yeah.
The metaphor is that you can do heart transplants in the desert because you've seen Wizard of Oz once.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm not saying that subtext has to be there or many layers deep in order for a film to be good, but I just think...
Just something, though.
That when you're drawing... Yeah, when you've got... In your rearview mirror, you've got Terminators 1 and 2 and the little hiccup that was Terminator 3. Like, you can make something of this. And I think going that way was perhaps the right way to go. You could not have done yet another time travel film. You couldn't.
Yeah, this is... If you had to do it... this is the problem. Like... This is why, and I don't like it per se, it's the least worst one, it's the one I find least offensive.
Yeah.
Because it does something new and it does its own thing. It does it badly, you know what I mean? But at least it tries.
Yeah.
You know? At least it tries.
I think as a jumping off point and as a premise, I think in a way having it set sort of shortly after Judgment Day through the eyes of a character who was in the past and now wakes up in that reality is a good start. You know, I mean, that's a great place to put the audience.
It's that kind of 28 Days Later, Day of the Triffids setup. It's that John Wyndham thing, where like you wake up and...
You've also got then an audience in a place where this is a bit of a no man's land in terms of the Terminator time. You know, so John Connor isn't the leader yet, blah, blah, blah. But I think perhaps what stymied them was the fact that like it was like Christian Bale, got to be John Connor. John Connor character has to be bigger. That means we have to devote so much more screen time to him and his character development, you know, where he's at. And it's all then about things that we already know. And it's kind of... I suppose if it were to be that Mad Max Road Warrior type thing with the sort of Terminators as a backdrop, who's to say that wouldn't work? But I think it's perhaps stymied by them shitting the bed and going, we've got to get a big star, and he wants to play that role. That means that role has to be bigger. Go.
Well, I've said this before. I was sick to death of like, oh, well, this is the story of how they become the people we know, and it's like, guess what? I like the people we know. Maybe we should see the people we know.
Yeah.
Like instead, because like Batman Begins, like okay, it comes about an hour for him to become Batman, but fuck me, is he ever Batman for the last hour?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But you know, that being said, and to kind of walk that back a little bit, and I said this in the Terminator 3 review. The good thing about the first two Terminator films is that you never see John Connor. You see John Connor as a child. You don't see John Connor the man.
No.
And I think and it ties back to what you were saying earlier. You shouldn't ever see the war either. You can see it in snippets.
Yeah.
But you shouldn't, because it's just going to be unsatisfying. It's the fucking Star Wars prequels thing all over again.
It's
like,
the
it's
Alien.
better off in here.
It's the prequels. Yeah. It's a classic example. You see John Connor in the second film very briefly, and he's literally just a stuntman or something that they got to just be like looking around, and then it goes to that sort of slow motion thing on his face, and he's got that scar down his face. And again, that's the whole. We're not supposed to know where that came from, and then we find out in this that it was because the Terminator got covered in fucking molten steel and got so hot.
The Terminator that looked like the one that was his friend and tried to kill his mum got covered in molten steel. Do you know what? John Connor was on a patrol one day, got into a skirmish with some Terminator, something blew up and hurt his face.
Yeah. And it's the whole point was that he's hot, so that when he does that, it gives him the scar instantly because it cauterizes, right? Rather than have to then have his face. Blah blah blah. It's just like, oh come on,
it's
guy.
Classic prequel. I mean, I'll give it that it tries to balance. It manages to be a prequel and a sequel at the same time. You know, which is what Star Trek did. J.J. Abrams, and okay.
Yeah, but I thought that was quite smart.
No, I did. I've discussed that before, but yeah, I think that is quite smart. Well, look, we've run out of time on Terminator Genesis. Terminator Salvation. McGee's Salvatron. Also, Linda Hamilton come back to record the tapes that he listens to.
That she did.
And now she's back for Terminator the 6th. Terminator Goes Forth. Terminator 6.
Over the top.
Rowan Atkinson's Terminator.
Yeah.
All right, that's it for now, and we'll see you next time.